Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Well, if you were watching the tape this morning, you saw the pressure test that I think we all have been bracing for. We had a consumer confidence miss, and we saw heavy friction between OpenAI and Microsoft that the media used to send the NASDAQ into a tailspin today. Micron and SanDisk both pulled back about 4 to 6%. And for a minute there, they looked like they were going to break the support levels that we've been tracking on this channel. But if you ignored the noise and you followed the signals and tracked the levels today, you just got rewarded with what might have been the most important print for the sector all year. Seagate just dropped their numbers, and it wasn't just a beat. It was a structural earthquake that added about 60 billion in market value to the sector in a matter of minutes. Tonight, we're going to cut through the noise, and I'm going to show you why the OpenAI fear, uncertainty, and doubt was just a massive gift for the institutions, and why tomorrow's open is looking like a gap up for the sector. We're going to talk about the performance of the memory titans today, what we saw them do on the market overall, what were the big narratives or stories that drove their performance, and what we're seeing in the after hours right now that gives us a signal of what we should expect to see at the opening bell tomorrow on Wednesday. But let's dive into it. But if you haven't done it already, hit like, hit subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all your guys' support. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the numbers that we saw on the market today. First thing I got to do, guys, is just show you what we did see in the NASDAQ. This is the NASDAQ 100. You can see across the board, we saw a bit of a mix. We saw Microsoft up despite all of the headlines around the tension we saw between OpenAI and Microsoft. They still finished the day 1% up, heading into their earnings tomorrow. We see Apple up as well, but if you look in the middle of the screen, Micron was down by just over 3.8% today. If you look further down, you see Western Digital was down by about 2.5%, Seagate down 2.8%, and SanDisk was down over 6% today. It was a rough day for the memory sector today. We saw massive growth coming in on Monday. Today, a bit of a pullback. We saw some tension in the market, a number of narratives that not only hit the tech sector today overall, but it hit the memory sector very hard. A few of those, let me call out first for you. They're just in the Wall Street Journal today. We saw some massive stories in the journal that were a catalyst for the day. The first one here was Microsoft and OpenAI split. We'll get into that in a moment. But the other one, the bigger story, was right here. You could see around OpenAI misses key revenue and user targets as they head for their high stakes sprint towards their IPO. This was a huge piece that just rattled the entire chip sector today, but ultimately rattled the memory sector overall as well. This caused a pullback across the board. This was the primary catalyst for what we saw today, in my opinion. The market suddenly started to question the AI demand, if it was hitting the ceiling overall. And it sent a shockwave through the sector, as I mentioned. They have been the poster child for generative AI. So if they're seeing a slowdown, investors started to fear all of this CapEx spending that we're seeing, all of it. Will it drive ultimately monetization? Will we see a cool off and a slowdown? And what impact will that have in the memory sector? What impact will that have on Micron and the high bandwidth memory piece? What impact will it have on SanDisk? Those two stocks were hit hard as a sympathy casualty of this narrative today. And when we see this kind of breakup, let's say, the way it was portrayed in the news between Microsoft and OpenAI, that added fuel to the fire. When they announced a major amendment to the relationship and the loosening of this exclusivity clause, OpenAI is now free to use other cloud providers such as Oracle or Amazon overall for its products. And Microsoft's license to OpenAI's IP is now non-exclusive. Investors initially read this as a divorce or a sign that Microsoft is backing away from its aggressive infrastructure build-out. This hit Microsoft's stock early, but the stock did recover. We saw it up by 1%, but it did hit the memory players as well. And those pulled down and got pulled down with Microsoft and the others based on just the relationship that the memory players have to the hyperscalers and to the build-out. We also see the final layer was this macro gloom that hit the tape right at the open. We see this pre-Fed meeting, the jitters and the consumer data came in. The conference board's index showed that consumers were growing increasingly pessimistic about business conditions due to sticky inflation overall. And with the FOMC decision coming up tomorrow on Wednesday. Institutional investors use the OpenAI headlines as an excuse to de-risk and lock in profits. Today was a masterclass in why we trade the structural constraints and not the news cycles. The headlines today created the noise, but the hardware architecture, the fundamentals that we follow on this channel, that's what eventually dictates the price. This morning, the media was screaming about how OpenAI is failing and the Microsoft partnership is crumbling. That noise is exactly what caused the dip that we saw in Micron and SanDisk today. But if you look at it in reality, OpenAI expanding to other clouds doesn't mean less memory is needed. In fact, OpenAI expanding to more clouds means more infrastructure build out, not less. Today's dip was a classic sell the headlines, miss the architecture move. The whales saw through the OpenAI miss. They were essentially resetting the coils for Seagate's explosion that we saw after the bell today. And let's jump in and talk about what we did see with Seagate today, because it was a massive print overall. They released their fiscal Q3 2026 numbers this afternoon, and the numbers just weren't a beat, as I said. They were a structural confirmation of the memory supercycle. I want to give you a breakdown. Let's dive into what we actually saw for them across the board today. So let me pull that up. You can see right here on your screen. Let me dive into some of the numbers. If you take a look at the highlights that we did see today, we saw revenue on the far right of 3.1 billion. You guys know I've been talking about, I was expecting 3.1 billion. The forecast, or what the analysts were expecting, were about 2.94 billion. 3.11 is a 44% increase year over year. We saw earnings per share of 410. That was remember, they expected about 350. So they just didn't beat their estimate. They pulverized it by about 60 cents per share. Gross margins were 47%. This is an all-time high for Seagate. It was driven by the shift to the high-density Mozak 3 Plus, their HAMR drives, and their free cash flow. If you look down here at the second bullet point on the left, you can see they have almost $1 billion in free cash flow this quarter, a 57%. It's up 57% sequentially. It's the highest level over a decade for the company overall. And if I scroll down and just show you a few more pieces, you can see here in the markets and technology highlights, you can see their hard drive exabyte shipments is up 39% year over year, 90% shipped to data center customers. And right below that, year-line exabyte supply largely allocated through the 2027 year. Data center revenue was 2.5 billion, 55% year over year across the board, driven by strengthening cloud and enterprise demand. This is the 10th consecutive quarter of revenue growth from cloud customers. You can see the third bullet point in the middle here, ship Mosaic drives up 75, it was about 75% of leading global cloud customers on track to complete remaining 2 customer qualifications in June. If you look down below, Mozak 4 Plus has qualified with 2 of the largest cloud service providers, matching with timelines, matching those products, highlighting the HAMR technology maturity. You can see Mozak 4 Plus is expected to be the majority of their HAMR exabyte shipments exiting this year, and Mozak 5 Plus development progressing well, targeting late 2027 to begin qualifying shipments overall. This was a massive print for Seagate. It's exactly what we thought it would be and how it would lift the quarter. I think when you take a look at their structural growth, their CEO, he explicitly stated that Seagate is entering a new era of structural growth. The most important takeaway of this is this moves the sector away from being cyclical, this boom bust, into an infrastructure phase of steady, high margin utility plays for these companies. If the HDD market is structural, then the high bandwidth market and the NAND markets are also structural as well. In the after hours, let's take a look at what we're seeing right now with Seagate and with the other memory players. But you can clearly see a massive performance with Seagate. We're down, like I said, 2.8 today, but look what happened in the after hours. They're up almost $100, 17% in the after hours, getting ready, and they're coiled up, ready to explode tomorrow when that opening bell rings. And if we look at Micron and the others, we can see that Micron right now, it is closed at 504. It's up about $13, 2.5%, just tracking right now at 517 in the after hours. And for the others, you can see SanDisk has their earnings in a day. You can see they are closed at just over 1,000 right now. They have $44 gain in the after hours, sitting at about 1,046. And Western Digital is up by $35, about 9% overall, just tracking at just about 427 a share right now. So we're seeing massive moves for the memory players. This is exactly the impact that Seagate had on the entire sector with their earnings they dropped today. Massive improvement. So what do we expect tomorrow when the opening bell rings? I think we should expect Micron and SanDisk to gap up at the opening. The Seagate shockwave just proved that the sell the news crowd was wrong. Tomorrow afternoon, Microsoft reports. Everyone will be looking at one number, the Azure growth. If their CEO confirms that Project Stargate is moving full steam ahead despite the OpenAI news, the memory sector is going to go into a vertical squeeze. And then we have the FOMC decision tomorrow. Powell is likely to hold rates, but even if he hints at a dovish tilt because of today's weak consumer confidence data, it'll be like rocket fuel for these high growth semiconductor names. So today was just a mess in the headlines, but a masterclass on the tape. While everyone was chasing the OpenAI noise this morning, we watched the support levels hold exactly where the volume said they would. The Seagate print tonight, it really just confirms what we've been seeing on this channel. We've been seeing that the supply chain is tight, the margins are expanding, and the structural growth thesis, it's actually just playing out in the numbers. We're not guessing anymore. Now we officially have the data. But don't think for a second that it ends with Seagate tonight. We still have the final two heavy hitters stepping up to the plate in the memory sector this Thursday. Western Digital and SanDisk both dropped their prints after the market closes on Thursday. And since Seagate just confirmed they are essentially sold out of mass capacity drives through 2027, all eyes are going to be on Western Digital and SanDisk now to see if they're seeing the same type of structural squeeze in their business. If they follow the Seagate playbook and show the record-breaking margins, we are looking at a full sector repricing that moves the entire group out of the cyclical category and into the AI utility status. I'm going to be watching the tape for any pre-earnings accumulation tomorrow. So let's stay sharp and let's see if the bulls can carry this momentum through the Fed decision tomorrow, through the Microsoft earnings, and into Thursday's bell. I'll be back later tomorrow night to break down what we saw in the market, to break down the Microsoft numbers and what it means to the memory sector overall. So between now and then, let's stay sharp, let's watch the tape, and I'll see you guys soon. Have a great